Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining in. Sincere apologies for starting it 5 to 6 minutes late. We'll try to cover up during our session, right? So today's session is about best practices to save last mile logistics costs in Southeast Asia. I think okay. So continuing onward, while Lynn sort of figures out the tech issues on his side, right? Today we let me just quickly start by introducing myself. I look after the entire business for locals globally, right? And responsible for tech sales. And we have today joining with us Lynn, who
Oh
heads
my
the
God.
procurement function for Singapore Post. Okay, so I will just still continue. Lynn joins us from Singapore Post. He takes care of the procurement globally for Singapore Post, and a person who has handled, sorry about that, multiple adoption of tech platforms for the last few years, comes with a lot of experience across e-commerce, parcel, and post industry. So welcome aboard, Lynn. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this with us, and I'm sure our listeners are going to benefit a lot from the insights which you have. Um, Let me kickstart by some of the very, I would say, commonly known issues, right? But I guess across Southeast Asia, one of the biggest topics which we come across, whether in B2B or B2C, is the increasing share of last mile to the overall transportation cost. We work with some of the brands and some sectors where it is now as high as 45 to 50%, right? And with the overall scenario where e-commerce, the way it is growing in some of the countries like Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam, and Thailand, this problem is going to become bigger and bigger. I guess it's a unique proposition from the ASEAN perspective, where unemployment contrasts to what's happening in North America or Europe is actually declining. The disposable income is increasing, right? I think fundamentally this region is poised to see an amazing growth of e-commerce, and what we have seen over the last 4 to 5 years is continue to grow, right? Some of the statistics, we talk about increasing number of customers are now looking for delivery services, at-home delivery services, right? Irrespective of what category or what vertical you are selling, 40% of customers are now asking for a delivery service to be there. Why is Southeast Asia a complicated scenario, I would say, in terms of last mile logistics cost? And we'll try to bring the perspective of North America and Europe as well. Uh, in terms of, if you look at the entire Southeast Asia as a region, right, it's very heterogeneous in nature compared to the homogeneous structure across North America. One of the biggest complications which we come across is the high density of populations in cities like Jakarta, which is leading to a lot of traffic congestion, which makes last mile delivery challenging a lot compared to some of the most developed part of the world. The geographical complexities, right? We have route restrictions across cities like Manila. We have odd or even rule across cities like Jakarta, right? Satisfying some of these regulations or road restrictions becomes extremely challenging from a last mile delivery planning perspective. And trust me when I say this, as the population keeps increasing, density keeps increasing, unavailability of good road infrastructure, governments are going to come heavy in terms of implementing more and more such restrictions, which is only going to increase the problem as we go forward from here, right? A probably less talked challenge, but a very important and a critical challenge in terms of last mile is incorrect addresses, right? Um, the way consumers write addresses, there is a lot of context built in it. Machines can't understand these addresses. It leads to a lot of waste in riders' time. And as all of us can very easily agree on the fact that in case of last mile, 5 to 6 to 10 minutes worth of delay in every single delivery, it's really impacting the efficiency in terms of last mile deliveries, right? And the last bit is, and I talked about it in terms of countries and governments now regulating and imposing newer and newer restrictions. Very recently, we had this experiment done by Indian government in India, where we were trying to experiment what Jakarta has in terms of order even rules. As we are implementing our solutions across Philippines, we are seeing more and more restrictions being added with every single passing quarter or year in terms of government and traffic authorities adding these regulations. So all we see is increasing complications or complexities around last mile logistics cost. And I only see this share of last mile logistics cost to the overall percentage of transportation cost increasing and not decreasing with time, right? Now, one of the very interesting insights we are asked every single time we interact with our customers is, um, do you believe that something like Amazon will happen in Southeast Asia, right? Do you believe that the way Amazon impact or the Amazon phenomena happened in Southeast across North America? Do we see something like that happening in case of Southeast Asia? Maybe not by Amazon, but maybe by Alibaba, right? And the answer to that question is, well, frankly, we don't know. We can only have theories around what is so different in North America and Southeast Asia, which will prevent one single large player to drive that kind of disruption. What I can say for a fact is more than 50% of consumer brands we work with, right? And these are some of the largest brands with as high as 50 to 60% market share in the kind of countries where we are working in across Indonesia, Thailand, Philippines, Vietnam. Each of them are now working with either an on-demand cab aggregator or an on-demand bike aggregator, right? And they are in various stages of engagements in terms of trying these platforms or services out for last mile deliveries, right? So what I can say for sure is that it's not years away, it's probably few months away where you will see large consumer brands fulfilling their last mile delivery orders with the launch of newer operating models like direct to consumer, right? Or a crowdsourced distribution model relying on platforms like Gojek or Grab and multiple other local platforms which are offering this last mile mobility solutions or platforms, now also converting into platforms to fulfill last mile delivery orders, right? So what I would say is, yes, of course, we need to watch out for what potentially Amazon did to North America. Maybe somebody can do that for Southeast Asia, maybe Alibaba. But given the heterogeneous nature of this market, where every country differentiates from the other country, and we talked about some of the differentiation factors in the previous slide, we see this phenomena difficult to happen in Southeast Asia. Of course, we can't say it for sure. What we can say for sure is experimentation of newer models, disruption in distribution, last mile deliveries, owing to some of the platforms like Gojek and Grab is evident. It's not going to be few quarters away. We just believe it's few months away. And almost every single customer of ours is in some stage of discussion or engagement with such kind of platforms, right? So we need to leave behind the archaic mentality when it comes to tech, right? Given the kind of disruption, we need to be more future ready about it. And these are some of the topic points we wanted to cover. One of the regions, one of the important and biggest regions for locals has been North America, right? And we are seeing this firsthand where people were delayed in reciprocating to what Amazon did, right? Almost everybody is towards the fag end of implementing tech, right? And it's becoming so critical, as you can see. Walmart now has been experimenting quite aggressively. One of the biggest focus for them has been exploring tech whether for at-home deliveries or delivering for curbside pickups, or um, or things like automation in warehouses, inside the stores, etc., is some of the critical things which we are seeing retailers are now adopting. Our idea is we can see this kind of change happening. Let's be ready from a future perspective and not really follow after the changes have been done. What are some of the things which we can do to curb the rising costs, right? I think it's given that the last mile costs are increasing, the complications are increasing, right? One of the first and the foremost thing which we believe is adopting tech, right? Some of the points which we wanted to discuss over here, and unfortunately, Lynn is still facing some issues, but given our experience of working with so many enterprises, I will try to cover up this point as in as much breadth as possible, right? What we see is that enterprises have adopted tech to digitize processes. We have seen that they have adopted tech to digitize their operations, right? Decision making, it is still very manual. We are talking about so many critical challenges and constraints on the ground. And I talked about traffic, I talked about route restrictions, I talked about addressing system as a problem. And we can't rely on human beings to be able to solve such kind of problems, right? Essentially, if your tech is not adopting to the changes, forget about it being an enabler. It can actually take you behind by quite a few number of years. And that is one of the most important part we wanted to discuss today, that tech can only be an enabler if you are adopting tech which can change as fast as changing and new dynamics of newer operating and business models coming in, right? So from that perspective, we believe that technology, specifically newer techniques like artificial intelligence and machine learning, will play a great role. um, Talk about what are the couple of other things you can do to curb the rising costs. Decision making is still very intuitive. People talk about people talk about big data analytics. People talk about advanced analytics. Frankly, 99% of brands we work with and the customers we work with are still relying on intuition for making decisions rather than using data, right? The kind of governance structure you have in terms of implementing tech, it is not in place. The flexibility which is required by larger enterprises to adopt tech is not there, and we believe that comes from the top. I can see Lynn joining in. Lynn, are you able to participate now in the discussion? Lynn, are you able to participate in the discussion now? Unfortunately, we're talking about tech and we're still struggling with outdated explorers and stuff. Sincere apologies for that.
Hello,
Now coming to the
Krishna.
main topic, which is around best practices to adopt tech, right? Or what can you do to reduce your last mile delivery cost? One of the biggest reasons for us to have Lynn joining us today is the primary question, which is in-house. Should we have everything in-house, or should we look for off-the-shelf products, right? And of course, coming from locals, we have a fundamental belief that off-the-shelf products are significantly better as it gives agility, but would love to quote some examples from Singapore Post, who essentially was focusing on postal services, has everything in-house policy, were using in-house tech. Eventually, when moved into e-commerce as a business, only to realize that the tech which they had was so archaic in nature that forget about it adding efficiency. It actually led to a very bad customer experience. Shipments not being delivered on time, The ability to route the orders dynamically, given the demand is dynamically, was not there. Static processes led to a lower efficiency, whether in terms of rider utilization or vehicle utilization, or the time spent in the warehouses for picking, packing, sorting, all of that combined. I guess the answer to this question is, if your in-house tech is as agile as some of these off-the-shelf products can be, then the answer to your problem, of course, is to go with in-house. But frankly, some of the challenges which we see across implementation of solutions like Locus is the tech is so archaic that it can't even integrate with some of the deep tech platforms like Locus, right? So um, Singapore Post has taken a decision to go with off-the-shelf products to be agile. Given the focus for platforms like Locus is to do only and only tech
Krishna.
development. Yes, Link, can you hear us now?
Yes, Krishna.
Awesome. Thank you for
You
joining
can hear
in.
me now?
Yes, we can. Awesome, Lynn. So can we start with this point on your experience on in-house versus off-the-shelf products? How does Singapore Post? What are some of the challenges which you guys faced? How do you take a decision on some of these points? Yeah. Apologies, guys. I think he seems to have dropped off again. So the long story short, the answer to this is you need to look for more agile solutions, which is
And
what
lost
most of
the
the
connection.
off-the-shelf products can offer, right? And experiences from franchises and brands like Singapore Post highlights that agility of tech is so much important. And I introduced some of the newer developments which we are seeing happening across Southeast Asia, which is brands relying on Gojeks and Grabs of the world. You need to be agile. And from that perspective, we believe that off-the-shelf products have significant more agility compared to some of the in-house solutions, right? The second most important part, or rather practices which you need to adopt to implement tech, is around change management, right? I think this is a very loosely discussed topic, but one of the most important topics from our perspective. Let me give you some statistics from our side. Roughly 35% of engagements which customers do with Locus doesn't see the light of the day only and only because of change management issues, right? The issues run from everything from management not having an insane clarity on what they want to achieve with a deep tech platform like Locus, or management taking a backseat when the pushback from the on ground resources come back in terms of using tech, right? Um, the gestation period required and the patience required in implementing tech, right? That not being there, um, ability ability to understand some of these newer techniques like AI and ML. And trust me when I say this, these might sound like buzzwords, but we have a lot of hi, I'm told that Lynn is back online. Lynn, can you try speaking something, please?
Krishna, yes, okay.
Sorry, my bad. I wasn't sure you are there. Do you want to comment on the change management practices, Lynn?
Yes, Krishna. So to everybody, I'm very sorry that it's taken longer to join the call. And I believe that Krishna would have spoken quite a bit of the challenges that we face. So on the change management part, okay, and of course, change management with every transformation program is a very key and important element. And in order for change management to really take a very high level of effectiveness, we need to have the leadership commitment into the program. Transformation programs such as this, especially the implementation of technology, it is not a short-term measure. It is usually a long-term measure, and typically in the beginning of the transformation journey, the ROI will not be impressive at all. And there will be a lot of question mark raised as to whether it was the right choice or not. But I think the leadership commitment on the transformation and carrying through the journey is a very important part in implementing technology. If not, then the implementation has a short lifespan, and no amount of ROI will be recovered at all.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you, Lynn, on this one. I think lot of uh, lot of people echo this kind of view. Yet we see a big issue with change management. What are some of the practical advice you would want to give, like um, right from recognition of people on the ground to use tech? Are there certain things which Singapore Post did which helped you in driving this change management in adopting some of these newer tech platforms over the last few quarters or years?
Well, I wouldn't even say recognition of the people on the ground. It is involvement of the people on the ground from the very beginning. I think sometimes we take a very short-term view by saying that if the people on the ground and the workers, okay, when they are aware of a transformation or implementation of technology point of view, they get very resistant to it. And naturally, they get resistant if they are not understanding what a transformation is all about. So that element of explaining and appealing to the people on the ground and also learning to see what their challenges are. In our organization, it is an organization with a
Sorry,
lot of
I
people who have
uh,
worked
there
many
are
years.
there are some people messaging that they can't hear you. They can't hear you speaking.
Okay, is this
I,
better now?
I can hear you speaking. I'm not sure why people can't hear you speaking.
You can hear me, Krishna?
Yes, I can hear you. Um, Let me just quickly check. Okay. It seems it might be a network of other people, Rin. So some people are now saying that they can hear you. Sorry. Please go ahead.
Okay, okay, yep. So let me pick up from where I left out. So as I said, that the change management is best to involve the people on the ground from the very beginning. The organization that I'm in right now is an organization with many people with a long service history, some stretching as far as 40 years. They naturally have developed and acquired a lot of knowledge, and it will be a shame if we do not tap on to the knowledge that they have acquired over the years, recognize that, and incorporate their learning and their knowledge into the new programs.
Yeah, very, very valid point. Thank you so much for sharing your views, Lynn. One of the points which we discussed in the previous slides, but I would really love your thoughts on it, was around um, how did Singapore Post or you went around discovering whether to develop everything in house or to procure from the market off the shelf products, right? And we would love to understand some of your decisions you have made and what was the rationale behind it. I think our listeners, and we can see quite a varied set of listeners joining in today. They would love to understand your thoughts on how did Singapore Post go about choosing between in-house or off-the-shelf products.
All right. Okay. Thanks for the question, Krishna. Okay. Again, is that this is a company that has a long history, and previously we have gone on the route of developing all the applications ourselves. That makes us slightly less agile and adaptive to the market conditions. So in my role as the head of procurement here, the decision of make versus buy is a very key important factor. And especially in the last few years, with many players and service providers in the market who are using newer technology that can enable us to scale up the capability and the functions is very important right now. I believe you have covered earlier on how quick and dynamic the e-commerce business is. And if we had relied on our traditional way of developing, of implementing and rolling out a home built solution, it will not help us for a very long time. And we are having some challenges and some question marks and some key transformation decisions right now on whether to replace all the in-house solutions with entirely off-the-shelf solutions that is quick to implement, that is more scalable, that is fast to deploy. So I think along the years, we have to be more open-minded to accepting off-the-shelf solutions. It may be a case that we have to change our business processes and practices, but if that change fits more into a longer-term and scalable solution, I think that would be a good call to take.
Yeah. I think some of the takeaways from what you just mentioned, right? So agility of organizations to change their processes to adopt tech, right? Um, patience and patience with the longer gestation period for some of these tech to start yielding return on investments, along with change management and basically whatever works best for your business should be the approach. And off the shelf, some of the off the shelf products, the new age off the shelf products can really help you in implementing some of these newer tech or solve some of these newer challenges around e-commerce, right? So and I can echo that a lot of organizations like Singapore Post are going through this massive transformation in terms of the thought process on them now becoming okay to look for off-the-shelf products, them now becoming okay to work with startups, right? And I guess that is how organizations like yourself, they are leading the change over here. And I guess a lot of people in Southeast Asia would look to what Singapore Post did in terms of adopting newer tech as they move from post and parcel business to e-commerce business as well.
Yes, that's
Lynn,
right.
so yeah, coming from your experience heading procurement at Singapore Post, right? Some of the two different topics I wanted to also ask your feedback on was your comments on setting up the governance structure, the tech governance structure. The implementation becomes a challenge if this is not in place. And do you have like a broader process of evaluating tech which you would want to share with listeners? How should they go about choosing? How should they go about evaluating? How should they go about finalizing? Some basic thought process would be really, really helpful.
Okay, good. Okay, the two topics, let me start with the first one on tech governance. And this is really an experience that I've developed from my previous experience before I started work in Singapore Post. Tech governance, what I meant by tech governance is the ongoing management, active management of technology. Technology, as we all know, and I believe that you would have said it before, Krishna, that it is a good enabler. A good enabler just stays as that. And especially, well, without any disrespect to my colleagues and the rest of the participants here from the IT community, the IT community is very good in implementing technology, whether it's a ERP, whether it's a new technology in transportation management, warehouse management. They have all the methodology and the tools, whether it's Prince2 project management and everything else. Those are very good and solid and sound practices. But what happens when the system that is newly implemented has went live? It is entirely up to the user right now to support, to manage the suppliers or the vendors or the service providers who support the technology. To the user community, the user departments, the call centers have that ability, and worse still, if the technology is even deployed across the organization in different geographies, in different business units, in different business functions. So by
Absolutely.
governance,
Yeah.
I mean that we need to have a very strong and precise method of understanding how the technology has been built, Any change in the business, how will it be reflected in change requests to the technology? What is the phase approach of rolling out, and also to monitor the effectiveness of the technology in supporting the business process? That is what I meant by governance.
No, absolutely. I think
So,
defining KPIs and KRAs even before you start implementing tech, and what is the expectation, realistic expectations out of that is are some of the key things which I believe should be done way before the tech even starts getting implemented on the ground, right? So, rightly said, Ling, and thank you for your thoughts on that. In the interest of time, given we lost a bit of time in the internet issues, right? Would love your quick thoughts on what is the process you suggest the listeners on this call should adopt for evaluating some of the newer age technology which is coming in, and then post that we will move directly onto the Q&A. We wouldn't want to keep our listeners who might have a lot of questions for you on without the questions being addressed by you.
okay, so very quickly on the process of evaluating technology, this is nothing new. Okay, this is a traditional procurement process of identifying the vendors, specifying the requirements that we have in the business, and then determining whether the vendors and the service providers have the functions that is required and how effective it is. So the traditional way of doing due diligence, evaluation, talking to the other customer base, doing pilot programs to assess the new technology is all needed, and it has not changed from the from the practices from a few years ago. It's just that we need to be more in touch with the market developments and be ready to accept new technology like cloud technology compared to hosting technology.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Lynn. Right. On that note, I just wanted to very quickly sum up our presentation part. Right. The most commonly asked question to us is um, artificial intelligence. Right. Is it going to lead to reduction of jobs? To be frank, wherever locus has been implemented, we actually have enabled people to make better decisions, right? Right from their skill enhancement on some of these newer tech platforms. Of course, the impact on positive customer experience driving business, that leading to growth of business and more hiring on jobs. From that perspective, we as an organization don't think that artificial intelligence is a job killer. We believe that it will create more jobs than it will replace. It will enable people to make better decisions. um, some of the real world examples on how SingPost have used tech, and how some of the customers of Locus have used tech, right? Adopting some of the practices which Lynn just described. Lynn, would you mind sharing like a successful case study of sorts, how Singapore Post was able to disrupt or optimize the distribution of e-com packages through an efficient supply chain?
Okay, sure. Okay, so firstly, the question of whether AI will replace jobs, I'm with you, Krishna. I don't think it will. And an example of how we are using technology is on the last mile delivery of parcel, of e-commerce parcel in particular. When we talk about e-commerce in Southeast Asia, a lot of them are on slightly lower value parcels. Those can be included into our regular mail delivery network. But then you would have some e-commerce parcels and products that are of slightly higher value. And in order to deliver this like any ordinary parcel, I think it's not doing justice to the buyer itself. So we've implemented a piece of technology that we are rolling out right now, whereby the route is planned for the courier delivery person, for the delivery courier, and we take into account the road conditions, the weather conditions, and we would have the technology sending an SMS or message via the mobile application to inform and to keep the user updated on what is the approximate delivery time. And we're talking about a 15 minutes window of delivery in order to preempt and to alert the end user on when their package is going to be delivered. Again, is that we are very selective, understanding that when a user is buying some e-commerce products that is worth a significant amount of money to them, then we have to take extra care. And we can't do that by ourselves. We need to rely on technology and on a data AI platform to be able to predict and to react in the way that we do.
It's actually inspiring to hear what you described in terms of how we are using last mile delivery route optimization to not only bring efficiency but also to drive customer experience, right? As the convenience and the hunger for convenience by consumers is increasing in Southeast Asia, we wish all the best to Singapore Post, and we are really hopeful as a consumer to benefit from some of these new age tech adoptions which Singapore Post is driving. Thank you so much for sharing that. With this, Lynn, there are a lot of questions which are being asked, right? So let me just start with some of them, and would love to know your thoughts on it. One of the listeners have asked about how to be a green solution in last mile deliveries, right? And this is coming up quite heavily across other partners of Locus as well, Lynn, where um, inefficiencies in last mile is leading to a higher fuel consumption. Um, we would love to know your thoughts about what the participants are asking. How to be a green solution in the last mile delivery? I guess what they're trying to ask is what can be done to sort of increase environmental consciousness in the last mile deliveries. Would love your thoughts on that.
Okay, so it's an interesting question. Okay, and when we talk about green technology, we always relate into the carbon footprint and everything else. And let's face it, the business of technology is about moving products. And in many times, this is not done in a clean manner, but that doesn't stop us from starting from somewhere. So we are at this moment exploring a piece of technology that we've implemented about 2 years ago, but we have never really harnessed the power out of it. Right now, we are relooking at this piece of technology on vehicle telematics by trying to use it to influence and change the behavior that our drivers are operating. That is to stop hard acceleration, to avoid hard braking when in their delivery routes, and also to avoid idling time in the vehicles itself. So we're trying to leverage on this solution we've implemented and trying to harness more data out from it in order to correct the behavior of the drivers. And there were some claims by saying that by doing a proper vehicle telematics analysis and change of behavior, typically you can get between 12 to 15% fuel savings. So that in a way contributes a small part to being a green. It's not entirely removing it. Electric vehicles, there's always a lot of talk on it and everybody exploring it. And I guess that we will take a jump into that technology when the time comes, when the maturity is there.
Now, rightly said, I think electric vehicles with the kind of focus coming from governments across all the countries, where some of the governments, like Indian government, has already introduced this mandate, where a big chunk of last mile transportation has to go completely on electric vehicles, right? And fuel efficiency, absolutely, 12 to 15% of efficiency with the kind of prediction analysis you mentioned is something which is really possible. In the meantime, while I put forward more questions over to you, Lynn, I would request participants to put questions, given that we have, without announcing, opened the Q&A round. But please do post your questions, and I will keep receiving it, and I will try to structure in a way where all of the questions can be addressed. Right. Lynn, so the next question from some of the users is typically the decisions around optimization. It's sometimes there are trade-off between cost and service level, right? Especially with the advent of e-com, with multiple stakeholders involved. As you mentioned, Singapore Post is a very large organization, right? How to find the right expectations across everyone involved? I guess the question essentially is that when you try to implement tech, you have to do a lot of selling internally to all the stakeholders as well, right? How should one go about it? If it's a business or it's supply chain or operations, who's going to benefit out of it? How should they position this tech internally to win the mandates and basically satisfy the cost and the service level questions both, which might come from procurement, finance, anybody and everybody.
Okay, so let me try to answer that by saying that the stakeholder involvement, engagement, and expectation management is not only peculiar to tech, but to every aspect of business, whether they're large or small scale business. The example that I've quoted, whereby we are implementing a piece of technology right now to be able to alert the end users within a 15-minute window period of the impending delivery of their packages, there's cost involved, obviously. Okay, and how do we further optimize that? Now, in that aspect, what we have chose to do, instead of just optimizing and parking the cost somewhere else, we became more upfront to the customer by saying that, look, this is a service improvement, and we are not applying it blindly to all the e-commerce packages that we handled, because as I said, many of the e-commerce packages are below $20 in value, and the customers are more than happy, the end users, the consumers are more than happy to receive those packages in their mailbox at the end of the day. But the high value items, we are selectively saying that, look, we provide this almost like a white glove service to the end user. And the cost, surprisingly, is not as high as what everybody expected to be. So by putting it into part of the delivery cost, we are improving the service. Okay, and the cost has gone up tremendous. It's not tremendously, it's only a marginal amount. And hoping that the improvement of service will bring a repeat order and a repeat usage of our services. So it's a strategic decision that we have made.
Yeah, no, I guess the kind of focus on customer experience and serviceability improvement brands should have. We see this trade-off between cost and service level sort of being debated still, right? And I think it's a no-brainer in the current scheme of things that customer experience and higher and better serviceability levels is the way to go forward. We know of businesses across the world who have taken this as a very, very conscious decision that the short-term focus has to be on the well. As a business, you should always have a focus on customer service, but given the advent of newer competition coming in, you need to be very much in front of customer when they need you to be, right? And if you have to sacrifice a bit on the cost in short term to stay relevant, I guess the decision still should be in the favor of serviceability. So very glad to hear that the cost increase was not as much. I would also give a credit to probably the practices which you had adopted in implementing to ensure that the cost doesn't skyrocket. One of the other questions is around use of artificial intelligence in last mile deliveries, right? And I think it's an opportune question. Allow me to sort of share what you're seeing on the screen right now is around so route restrictions, traffic patterns, road networks, where to park, where not to park are some of the questions which traditionally we have relied on human intuition or the tribal knowledge of people sitting in warehouses. And essentially, that tribal knowledge, if somehow can be replicated using artificial intelligence, the decision making in last mile can finally become completely automated, right? So let me start by mentioning the problem statement of last mile. Is you rely on human beings to make decisions simply because you need their tribal knowledge, you need their understanding and local expertise. What if machines can get that local expertise, right? Thanks to structured and labeled data now available. And that is how artificial intelligence can finally bring decision making digitization, which is what essentially what you're seeing on your screen. One of the largest e-grocery players, not only across Southeast Asia, but actually across the world, achieved operational profitability by implementing artificial intelligence driven solutions where essentially the patterns on road networks, route restrictions, depending on the load in the vehicle, the driving speed, where to stop, where not to stop, these kind of intelligence got built in programmatically, and they benefited significantly to become one of the world's first operational profitable um, last mile online grocery platform, right? So this is a practical example of how AI helped in last mile deliveries in terms of bringing efficiency, and at the same time, pretty loyal set of customers, as Lynn mentioned. So Lynn, we are very sure that satisfied customers will come back, as we are seeing in this case with 99.5% SLA adherence. The sales is just growing up. The repeatable customers are sitting at around 45 to 50%, which is very, very high, right, for any kind of grocery food retailer. So I believe that is how AI has been able to bring the efficiency in last mile deliveries, right? We will take one more questions in the interest of time, Blaine, and I think this question is very relevant to be asked. We are still struggling with organizations coming and asking for things like on-premise tech solution versus over the cloud hosted solution, right? And unfortunately, I believe this was a question which was probably relevant 7 to 8 years back, but we are still seeing this as a relevant question. What are your thoughts, or what is the strategy with Singapore Post around on-premise tech versus cloud-hosted solutions?
Okay, so it's a very relevant question for us right now. And my take is that on-premise solution is critical if we have some pretty confidential and critical data that is to proprietary to the company. But if it's the processing of information data that is available, such as what Krishna you've mentioned here about the road conditions, the weather conditions, everything else, those information do not need to be on premise at all. And those are very quick information, and it's even better to leave them out in the cloud. So the choice is pretty, for me, the fundamental of the data ownership and the criticality of the data must be very clear. If it is so critical to the company that it is a reflection of the company's value itself and its own intellectual property, then on-premise solution would be appropriate. Other than that, if a solution is very dynamic, is available in the market, and is offered as a cloud solution, we should use that as the first preference, especially if the data is unstructured, it is very short term, short life, and it is open source anyway.
Absolutely. I think as more and more governments we are seeing are becoming stringent on data leaving, and all data is gold, right? And if organizations probably are really concerned about info security or data security, they can go with on-premise solutions. Are just to add on to what Lynn mentioned, some of our experiences does mention that on-premise tech solutions does take away a bit of agility over the cloud-hosted solutions. The kind of modifications, like we have seen businesses asking for newer features, um, accommodation to newer kind of operating models within just 3 to 4 months of recurring ask, right? And from that perspective, we struggle on on-premise tech solutions, but it's very fast to deploy over the cloud-hosted solution. So, and we are seeing this question's relevance going down. I was just surprised by the relevance of this question, and you did mention from the data security perspective. So that's a very valid point, and I hope that answered the question which the participants were trying to ask, right? Lynn, there are a couple of more questions, but we would love to answer those questions probably by asking them to send the questions across to us, and we can send it across to you. But in the interest of time, we would have to wrap up the webinar, right? Lynn, thank you so much for joining in today. Thank you so much for sharing the insights. And it was a real pleasure to host you. And if you have any words to talk to our audience about, please do go ahead.
Okay, firstly, okay, let me send my sincere apologies to everybody for the technical challenge that I faced and joining the call late. And I hope that you have gotten some insights into how different organizations work. And my last parting words would be technology is not to be feared. It is an enabler, but at the same time, technology cannot overrule us, and we have to still make the business decisions and the choices in order to deploy technology in the right manner so that it's effectively supporting us.
Absolutely. Let me also apologize for the issues from overall in general in organization in the initial bid. But thank you for being so patient. I know we shot off by 15 minutes, but thank you for being so patient with us today. And we will send you across this deck. Some of the people have asked for this slide deck. We will send you across this deck. And please do reach out in case you are not able to answer your questions. We will try to answer the questions either by ourselves or by looping you in with them directly. Thank you everyone for joining in today. It was really a pleasure to see all of you guys joining this webinar. Thanks, Lynn, once again.
Thank you again, Krishna, and
Thank
everybody.
you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.